my beautiful friends, my fellow seekers, my fellow space blobs and earth blobs and sparkly blobs and mystic blobs. I'm here for all the different blob forms you might be taking on, as well as for anybody who doesn't feel like a blob. I love whatever form you are coming in and ways that you are poetically expressing yourself in this life. You better believe that I am here for everybody's self-expression in beautiful ways. That's what it's all about. It's all about finding those ways to connect with our own energies and how we move through the world. And I am so happy to have every single one of you here with me as we explore the Gemini full moon coming up on November 27th. I've been thinking about it a lot in recent weeks because I've noticed something. And maybe you've noticed this too. I've noticed within myself, but also in all the people around me, my members on Patreon, my community friends, my close people in my life, the comments a lot of you have left, that we're all going through this really powerful season of shift and nobody really knows exactly where it's headed. You can feel the world changing, and like the way we've been doing things for maybe the last 10 years, it's shifting, it's changing, it's morphing, it's going into a totally different gear. And we're all wondering what that's going to look like individually and collectively. And you can really feel it in the air. So I think this full moon in Gemini is very, very helpful for getting a handle on that, understanding what that means for each of us, kind of getting into communion with how we're changing and supporting us. A lot of the energies that we're going to be working with in this Gemini full moon are kind of going to mirror what we just worked with the Scorpio new moon, which I find really interesting. So let's talk about this and some of the ways that I see this beautiful Gemini full moon showing up in our conversation. There are a few key words that came out right away as I was exploring the energetics of this full moon, which are imagination, new insights, releasing old dreams that do not fit anymore, as well as challenging outdated rules, which gives a little bit of that rebellious streak to this full moon, and also seeing in new ways, turning things on their head, turning it on the side. This is the last full moon before the solstice, and often the Gemini full moon takes that position in the course of the year. It's the last full moon we have before we hit into that solstice energy, before we kind of begin a new journey with the sun. And so it's often a place of deep assessment of what this last 11 months has been about, what we've moved through, the things that we've done and have worked and we've succeeded at, the things that we have done and it has just flatlined and gone nowhere, and the things that have worked out and the things that we've been confused about. It's just a really great moment of taking it all in, just sitting with it, taking in all of that energy. So this full moon in Gemini is going to be opposing the sun, of course, creating that full moon, but also opposing Mars, because Sun and Mars have been just hanging out really close together for weeks at this point. And so that's where we're kind of mirroring that Scorpio new moon. The Scorpio new moon, it was Sun, Moon, Mars all together. For this one, the moon has moved over and is now opposing those two. So we're really amplifying this different perspective and kind of bringing illumination to it. And I have a few themes that I think are really, really powerful when it comes to all of these conversations. The first theme that came in for me is looking at things from a completely new angle. Whenever we're working with the Sagittarius-Gemini axis, this is one of the key components of working with it. These are mutable signs, and they're interested in what happens when we try things out, when we don't stick to too rigid of one form, when we let things kind of dissolve and become their next form. Sagittarius is particularly interested in looking at things from all sorts of different angles, but so is Gemini. This is an axis that's very connected to learning, exploring, opening up the mystery of the world, trying things out, trying on different viewpoints, trying on different ways of talking about ourselves, trying on different life philosophies, and seeing things from a lot of different angles and being able to do that. So with the Sun and Mars together here in Sagittarius, creating that opposition with the moon in Gemini, what really makes us feel alive? Want to move through the world? What truly feeds your soul? What is the animating force that moves through you? This opposition is really, really powerful for having new perspectives on our lives. We may have thought through it intellectually dozens of times, whatever those questions that are coming up for you are, and feel like I'm never getting anywhere new. I just keep hitting up against the same wall. This is a full moon that might give us those flashes of insight, those flashes of inspiration with a completely different perspective. A breakthrough, an idea, a way of looking at it that we never would have considered before or would have thought didn't really fit us. I think that this full moon both allows us to welcome in those new insights as well as remembering what we can take a rest from. Full moons always play that role, right? Full moons are a place of release. And that opposition, that illumination that's going on here while we have new insight, new inspiration, looking at things from new angles, it's also going to include a little moment of recognition of what is okay to let go of. And I think that can be one of the biggest reliefs whenever we're working with a full moon. And I think just at the end of the year too, each of us will move through the year and pick up hobbies or routines or ways of doing something, and they kind of pick up speed as we move through. This is a great time to just think about if those still fit you and how they're feeling. The next theme that I think is really important is noticing places of rigidity and force in our lives. And this is really to do with that Mars component of this full moon. Because Mars, for me, is a really interesting place to look at how we have gotten ourselves to move through life. Mars wants to challenge us by getting us out there and doing stuff. But a lot of times I think we've been taught to use that kind of Martian life force in ways that have been a little bit violent against ourselves, where we force ourselves, we push ourselves to do things, we make things happen, we figure out little internal motivation systems to get through it and make it happen. And I think that this full moon opposing Mars, it's really asking some questions about what have you been forcing yourself to do to get through life, to survive, to feel like you're a little bit in control. Where do you feel pressures and tensions in your life? Where do you just feel a constant pressure and it's starting to chafe and exhaust you and you just can't keep it up anymore? Where is force really getting in the way of living life? I've found this with myself so many times. I will think I'm being really on top of it. I am getting the things done. I'm showing up on time. I'm making it happen. Even though I know I'm really forcing myself, I'm pushing myself over my energy limits. I'm pushing myself over what really feels good to do in a day. And I'm thinking I'm getting so much more done, but I'm not, because then I have to recover. Then I have to find days where I can just rest because I pushed too hard. So sometimes force is getting in the way of living our lives. As much as it seems to and purports to be making things happen, it isn't. So it's a great time to just ask that question. And is your force that you use on yourself or those around you working the way you think it is? These are hard questions to ask, because sometimes it can be a little bit like, oh, I can really see how much pressure I've been putting on myself and those around me to make sure things happen in a certain way. And is it doing what I think it's doing? And a lot of times we'll find that the answer is no, it's not. But this is also a place of relief, right? A lot of us are like, oh, that feels so good to realize that this isn't something I have to keep doing. And I think that's going to be a huge component of this Gemini full moon is what can we just say, I don't have to keep doing this? And it can be commitments, but it can also just be the little details in the day. Finally, the final theme that came up for me, it has to do with actually another conversation going on during this full moon, and it's not directly linked to the full moon, but I think it's important. And that is Mercury is going to be squaring Neptune. So Mercury is in Sagittarius, Neptune is in Pisces. And that square is really interesting because Sagittarius and Pisces have a really beautiful relationship. They're very important. They're both big dreaming energies. They both want to kind of see what happens when we dissolve into something a little bit different. So this square here is about the way we dream and about the way we force ourselves to dream, about the way we expect ourselves to dream. So some of the themes and questions that can come through for this are letting certain dreams release if they aren't fitting anymore. I know that I often have to kind of look through the dreams and the visions and the things I've got running in my background to make sure that I'm not carrying any dreams and trying to force myself into those dreams because I have them at some other point. This is a really great time to look at that. Make space for dreams that haven't landed yet. I think it can feel a little scary to just let there be open space, a blank page, a little bit of a vacuum if we're going through transition, because we want to have the answers. We want to have a concrete plan for how this is going to look as we move through it. But I think it's surprising to me what happens whenever I create just a little bit of space for the possibility that there are dreams that just have not landed yet. I don't even have one piece of the puzzle. That's what I call the unimaginable horizon, that horizon that's there, but we just can't see it yet because life is so hard to comprehend in its vastness and bigness. And I also think that this full moon and the square that I'm just talking about there with Mercury and Neptune is a place between worlds. And there's a lot about this Gemini full moon that is about being between two worlds, releasing the old, realizing energy that needs to go, and opening up to dreams that haven't landed yet. I think to some extent it's going to help us process that. But I also want to say at this point that you might just want to go into this Gemini full moon without expectations of having all the answers. It might feel a little bit unresolved. It might feel a little bit like just an acknowledgement that, yeah, you are between worlds right now. But I think knowing that and going into that and relaxing into that can be really empowering, because instead of feeling like we have to have all the answers, all the clarity, all the insight coming through, we might get some insight and then we're going to have an even bigger sense of, I wonder what's coming through next. So I'm really intrigued by this full moon because I think we often think of Gemini as chatty and talkative and very, in our language brain. But I think sometimes it's good to remember that Gemini can be quite surprising and quite mystical in its own way. There can be kind of a lot of questions posed without necessarily having all the answers. And I think that's the goal of this full moon, is just to get a little bit curious, get a little bit open, find some ways to relax if you can. Seriously, I wouldn't even overthink this full moon too much. I am going to be doing an activation that's going to help us work through kind of the questions to ask for rules that we have in our lives, as well as how to welcome in fresh sight. So if you are looking for a little bit more guidance on this process, I'd be very happy to see you over on Patreon for that. We're going to have such a good time with this one. I'm really looking forward to it. I'm shuffling my cards right now to see what intuitive message wants to come through. The Hermit. So perfect. Yes. I love this card. This is, anytime I see the Hermit, I just feel happy. It's very me. But also it makes a lot of sense with what we're doing. There is a seeking going on right now. We are in new territory. We got to light our lanterns. 8 of Swords. There you go. This is what I was just saying about there's an element of this full moon that is like, yeah, you're not really going to know exactly what to do next. Yet. All right, let's pull one more. This is so interesting to me. I haven't seen 8 of Swords in a little while, so I'm feeling it, and I can connect with that in a pretty profound way. And High Priestess. Yeah, we're working with a lot of levels here. This is so interesting. So the Hermit, our dear friend, the Hermit. The Hermit is kind of our deep knowing self guide. A lot of times we'll think, the superficial level of this is, you just stay home, stay out of the way, don't get into it too much. But for me, this is where the adventure begins. This is the Gandalf of the whole story, kind of bringing out all the parts. But there's a comforting nature to the Hermit. The lantern is lit, and we are being asked to follow that path, not knowing everything, and following an inner guidance that is very deep, the deep grumble of inner guidance is very strong during this full moon. And it isn't going to be just on the surface. So it's something to kind of remember too, that that deep grumble can sometimes be really, really subtle. And we also have the Eight of Swords, and this card is so fascinating to me. One of the things I've noticed in all the years I've been doing tarot readings, working with people, working with archetypes, this card has always played a really interesting role for me, because this is where we are right before big breakthroughs. Every time. It's like you have to go to this uncomfortable place where it feels like you're stuck. It feels like you can't see what is going to come next. It feels like, how is this going to work out? It feels like the mystery has just amplified by like 10 times. And that's not to say you have to feel miserable in it. You know, you have to feel horrible every time you have an unanswered question. It's not like that, but it's a feeling that we've hit kind of the end of our intellectual resources. You know, we've asked all the questions, we've done all the journaling, we've wondered as much as we could, and still have some questions, you know, and holding that space for mystery. And this is a card about surrender. It's about saying that my empowerment is through my ability to let go of trying to control this whole thing. And in that, there is a freedom. It's also a reminder to just accept that there will be some mystery with this full moon. There will. Now, we also have the High Priestess, and she is an initiator. I've always thought about her as an initiator. She's holding this space between worlds. She's right here at the doorway of the temple, welcoming us in to be an initiate into this hidden next world. And it's sitting with that moment. And that is very much the energy we're going to be working with, quite honestly, through the rest of this calendar year. Until we get into 2024, there is going to be a sense of being between worlds, between lifetimes, between energetic cycles. That holds for a little while. I think sometimes we think that energetic cycles closing and opening, it'll be kind of efficient. You know, I will have that fantasy often where I'll think, oh, you know, it'll just be like a couple of weeks and then I'll be in the next energetic cycle. But I've often found that really big shiftovers like we're going through right now as a world, as individuals, will take many months and sometimes years. It really is unique and individual, but it's something that takes time. We have to be okay with sitting in the in-between, because this is where the creative field lives. It doesn't live in the punctuation points that look like external accomplishments. Those are fun. Those are good. We like to have them. It's important for our little selves here in the world to have those moments. We need them. It's part of the experience. But the creative field lives in this kind of energy that we just saw here in these cards. And that's what I'm saying. The creative field is trying to land some new things. And so what we need to do is take care of our nervous systems, take care of our energetic systems, find spaces for relaxation, for joy, for enjoyment, getting our mind off things. Those are really, really important for letting that in-betweenness do its job. Like I said, I am going to be offering up a whole moment of review and journaling prompts and questions for this full moon over on my Patreon. We are also going to be beginning very, very soon our Gentle New Year series. I'm going to be doing that for 4 weeks. It's going to be this really soft closing of one calendar year, opening of the next. I'm creating this, and I did it last year as well, and it's going to be a little bit different this year, but I do it because I need a different framework for working with a new year. I don't do so well with the way that it's framed culturally, so I have to find my own rhythm with that. And so I created this for anybody who's also really sensitive this time of year and just wants a soft way to move through that doesn't feel as heavy as culture sometimes makes it out to be. So I'd love to see you there for both of those things and so many more creative ventures that we have over there. I'd love to see you. You can also find me on my website or on my Instagram. I will leave all the links to know where to find me and connect with me. I hope you have a beautiful Gemini full moon. I will see you back here so soon. We have so much to cover, including the Sagittarius new moon, the Mercury retrograde, New Year transits, all sorts of stuff coming up very, very soon. I'm loving you all so much. I hope to see you back here in the very near future.